Before I start the video, I want to give a huge shout out to my patrons, all three of you, really appreciate it. If you want to support me on Patreon to get videos early and to ask me questions about anything whenever you want, and also just to generally support me, I would really appreciate it. Link only in the description down below. With that out of the way though, let's begin the video. A while back, Marvel announced that Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness is going to be a horror movie, something that they've never done before and I thought was interesting, but I doubted that it would have as much of an effect on the movie as, well, it ended up having. Like, Marvel is great and all, but it is also known for being a bit formulaic. Most of the movies are very similar to each other, and there are, like, genre shifts here or there, which I really appreciate, which is why when they did announce that this is going to be a horror movie, it did kind of get me a little bit more excited for the movie, even though I'm not really the biggest fan of horror movies. But now that I've seen Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, I must say that at least the formula deviation did exceed my expectations. That's not to say that everything else didn't meet my expectations, because they kind of did. I did really like this movie, and my expectations I don't think were as high as other people online. Like, I'm seeing people complain that there aren't cameos from every single old Marvel movie, like the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, things that never existed, like Tom Cruise's Iron Man. None of those things happen in this movie, other than Patrick Stewart's Charles Xavier, who we already knew was going to appear. So it seems like people are disappointed by that, which is, I think, kind of crazy. How did we get to the point where a movie where Scarlet Witch fights Doctor Strange, taking us to alternate universes, introducing the Illuminati, casting John Krasinski as Reed Richards alongside Professor X, a much cooler looking Black Bolt from the one we saw in the Inhumans TV show, Captain Carter, and a different version of Captain Marvel, and after all that, you're disappointed? Like, I think that people's expectations were way higher than they should have been, and it's always just because of the trailers showing too much, or because of theory videos just thinking about everything. It happened in WandaVision as well, and people were disappointed with the finale, because they built up expectations for themselves that never should have existed. For WandaVision, it's a bit more warranted because it was Mephisto, and Mephisto was hinted at a bunch. But for this movie, there was literally nothing to say that other X-Men other than Professor X, or any other previous franchise in the Marvel Universe or Marvel franchises would appear. And what we got was pretty cool anyway. I was super excited to see this version of Reed Richards, even if he did die a second later. But they brought back the actor for Black Bolt, and in a much cooler costume as well. And yeah, they did kill all the Illuminati off at the end, which is a bit of a bummer, because when I did see them in the beginning, I was like, whoa, I really want to see a movie with them. I do think, however, it was very effective for the movie, and I'll get into that when I do, as the main point of this video is the fact that Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness definitely succeeded at being what they told us it's going to be in the past, which is a horror movie, as it's genuinely scary. I 100% did not expect Scarlet Witch to become a villain, like, right away. I'm not surprised that she's a villain, but I am surprised that she's the main villain of the movie. And the fact is that Doctor Strange went up to Scarlet Witch, 2 minutes later, she becomes the main villain of the movie. That is not what I expected. But I love the way they did it, which is, initially I thought a movie mistake where Wanda says her name, America, and obviously Strange didn't tell her name is America, so I thought that was a mistake, until you could see a bit of Strange being weirded out. He pauses a bit, and then Wanda says, "You didn't tell me her name." From that very second, Scarlet Witch became one of Marvel's scariest villains ever, rivaling Thanos himself, and in fact, she exceeds Thanos in at least how powerful she is, which is a part of what makes her so scary. She's so powerful. And the whole movie is about this powerful villain chasing after America Chavez and Strange protecting her, while also jumping from universe to universe, looking for the Book of Vishanti to defeat that super powerful monster villain. And I'll admit, not the greatest story. It is a bit simple. It works for the movie, but it's not exactly a complex story being told. But it works to allow Wanda to truly shine as a terrifying movie monster, chasing after the heroes. That's not to say that she's not a compelling villain and just a monster, but when she does function as that movie monster, it works really well. Specifically at one point where she steps in glass, resulting in a limp, and then she also gets like blood or oil from the Ultron bots all over her face, making her look like a zombie without actually turning her into a zombie. In the trailers, that you did think that hinted at a zombie world, like what we saw in What If. But instead of doing that, they actually took the main villain, which is Scarlet Witch, the main version of Scarlet Witch, and then made her just look like a zombie to up the scary factor, and that worked really well. Now, I do think that Wanda wasn't a perfect villain, like she was super scary and her motivations were good and all of that, but I feel like there was a bit of a gap, and maybe this is a bit more of a problem with the movie and not the villain of the movie, but I feel like there was a bit of a gap between Wanda at the end of WandaVision and Wanda here, where she became way more evil. Now, it is kind of explained by the fact that the Darkhold has a Darkhold on her, but I don't really think it's shown as much. At least it doesn't show the conflict within her until like the last scene. That is one problem with the movie I had, because WandaVision didn't really set her up to be like this monstrous of a villain. It did set her up to become a villain, but it didn't set her up to be a monster right away. So I do think there's a bit of a gap there, and that's one of my biggest problems with the movie. But she's still a very effective villain. Like I said, she's a very scary movie monster, but she also has a unique motivation, and there is a level of emotion to it. And the scene I mentioned earlier where you see her and her kids at the climax with the alternate Wanda, that was easily the best scene in the movie, just in terms of the emotion of it, and you do see the conflict on her face. And in that scene, you do see her realize that the Darkhold has a hold on her, so that she does destroy it. Until that scene, though, there isn't really much conflict. It's really just she's set in her ways, she's completely lost her mind, and she's evil. And I think there is a bit of a gap between WandaVision and that. But speaking of that alternate Wanda, and speaking of Wanda being scary, the moment where Scarlet Witch possesses that alternate Wanda and then looks directly into the camera as if looking right into your soul, that was absolutely unnerving. That was so freaky, and the freakiness and scariness definitely does not end there. This movie basically pulls an Invincible, introducing this almighty group of heroes, including a Captain Carter in live action who looks great. By the way, Black Bolt, with his actor from the Inhumans show being brought back, who also looks great in this new costume. Patrick Stewart returning as Professor X alongside the X-Men show theme, and the hover chair from that show, which is pretty cool. Maria Rambeau, Captain Marvel, Sorcerer Supreme Mordo, and Reed Richards, played by John Krasinski, which all of that was really hype, especially that last one. But after all that, they bring in another quote-unquote hero. Like in Invincible, it was Omni-Man, and here it's the Scarlet Witch. And she just absolutely massacres them, just like Omni-Man did to the Guardians of the Globe in Invincible. And it's the most brutal scene in Marvel history. The deaths here are so gross, and the fact that it's PG-13 is insane. I don't know how they got away with this in PG-13, at least for one of them. But it also makes me feel like this movie maybe should have been rated R, because there are some deaths where you know what happened, but they don't show everything. Now, I'll talk about all these deaths right now, going from least brutal to most brutal, because there are definitely some that are worse than others. Starting with the least brutal is Captain Marvel being crushed to death, which I felt like she probably could have survived that if she is Captain Marvel, but maybe she was already dead just from Scarlet Witch, and the being crushed to death was like the last straw to kill her. Then there's also Mr. Fantastic getting turned into spaghetti, and I think his head explodes, but we don't really see it well enough for it to be as brutal as the others. Captain Carter is absolutely sliced in half, which might be the most brutal death here. If we actually saw it, we do see like her top half, and we do see like the shield being bloody while it hits the wall. We don't actually see her being sliced in half, which is why it's not as brutal as, say, Charles having his neck snapped, which isn't brutal on its own. But the fact is, he's an 80-year-old man, and seeing an 80-year-old man get his neck snapped is so much more gross than seeing anybody else get their neck snapped. But nothing touches the single grossest shot in Marvel history, Black Bolt's death. This guy whose superpower is talking and that explodes people basically has his mouth completely erased from existence, which results in him exploding his own head, and they don't even shy away from it. We actually see it, at least I'm pretty sure we see it like only in his helmet. We see like his head being exploded inside his helmet, but that's probably the most they could show while PG-13, but even then it's disgusting. And I absolutely love it. It's like nothing we've ever seen before in Marvel. We have seen things like it outside of Marvel, like in The Boys, but the fact is this isn't The Boys. This is a Disney movie, this is a Marvel movie, and it's PG-13, and the fact that they got away with that is really impressive. So kudos to Sam Raimi for making the grossest scene in Marvel history, because it's gross, it's insane, it's unnerving, and so goddamn cool. And it's not just his death, it's that whole fight, the whole massacre of the Illuminati, which makes me really feel bad for that universe, because in the end our regular universe didn't really suffer many losses, other than a couple people in Camartage. In that universe, it's just a random universe that they went to later. They lost basically all of their mightiest heroes, so that sucks for them. So, like the people complaining about the cameos, like I mentioned earlier, I also saw a lot of people complaining about the fact that this movie, The Multiverse of Madness, didn't feature more of the multiverse. It was mainly just the Illuminati universe, the Evil Strange universe, and a montage of different universes, like the animation one or the paint one, near the beginning, which, by the way, is a scene I absolutely love, that whole montage of them going from universe to universe. Some universes are abstract and not human at all. And yeah, sure, I expected more universes as well, but I wouldn't say I was disappointed. This was the first time a Marvel movie traveled to a different universe, and the first time they traveled to a different universe in anything Marvel outside of animation, which is really just a what if. And, you know, this entire saga will probably be the Multiverse saga. That's probably what it's going to be called in the end. So we still have a lot of multiverse to see going forward, and I think the two main alternate universes that they did focus on, which is the Illuminati one and the Evil Strange one, which are the most important to the plot, plus the montage, I think it worked really well for the movie. I do think this movie could have been a bit longer, and with that time they could have done a couple things like show other universes, maybe also give us a bit more of Doctor Strange's arc, because there wasn't really much of it, or I didn't really love it. And it was a pretty short movie, only at 2 hours, so yeah, they probably could have given us a whole another half an hour. But in the end, I do think this was a good movie regardless. I definitely did talk about Wanda a lot more than Doctor Strange, but that's because this video focused on how scary the movie was, not really much else from the movie. So yeah, it makes sense that I'm talking about what makes the movie scary, which is the Scarlet Witch. But that's not to say Doctor Strange wasn't good in this movie as well. I did say I didn't love his arc, but I didn't hate it either. I thought that it was pretty good. Like, being asked if he's happy and getting over Christine, that was his main arc. And while, like I said, it could have definitely used more screen time, it wasn't bad either. Doctor Strange is definitely still a very, very compelling character. And also, just a really cool character. Like, they used his powers really creatively in this movie. The first thing that comes to mind is the music battle, or the epic rap battle of wizardry. That was a really, really creative use of his powers, even if it didn't really feel like a natural use of it. Like, I don't think that's what they would actually do if they were really fighting. But still, it was a very creative way to use his powers, and that did pop up a couple times in this movie. A lot of scenes where they used his powers in ways that they didn't in the past, and that was really, really creative. But in the end, I really like this movie. I feel like I like it a lot more than most people. It only has like a 7.6 on IMDb, and it just came out, which is unusual for a movie this hyped. And honestly, a movie this good, it definitely makes it into my top 10 MCU in like TV shows / movies, and I'd give it a 9 out of 10. Now, we saw a lot of Mr. Fantastic and Professor X in this movie. And when I say a lot, I don't actually mean a lot. We saw them a bit. And it brings up the question, what would the MCU look like if they were the main characters? Like, what would the MCU look like if Marvel never sold their rights, so that they initially focused on their most popular heroes in the cinematic universe, like Spider-Man, the X-Men, and Fantastic Four? If you want to know what that universe would look like, I actually made a video about that. Link will be in the top corner of the video in the cards. If you want to check it out. Regardless of that though, if you like this video, make sure to leave a like, share, and subscribe, and support me on Patreon. I would really appreciate it. Goodbye.